Good morning, and thank you for joining today's webinar from SPEC Innovations, Verification and Validation using Innoslate's Test Center. My name is Taylor Duffy, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. First, I'd like to go over some housekeeping. Next slide, please. During the presentation, feel free to send us questions and we will get them answered in the Q&A part of the webinar. You can also interact with us on LinkedIn through the Innoslate users group or through Twitter using the handle @SpecInnovations. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available to you after the live presentation, so keep an eye out for it in your inbox. Now, I would like to introduce you to our presenter, John Schatz. John Schatz currently serves as a Vice President of SPEC Innovations. He has more than 30 years of postgraduate experience as a Program Manager, Director of Systems Engineering, and various systems engineering and technical roles. He directly supports business development and technical performance with the U.S. Navy and other customers. Mr. Schatz designs tailored digital engineering environments to support DoD research and development and test and evaluation initiatives. He received his bachelor's in mechanical and aerospace engineering from Cornell University in 1991 and master's in electrical engineering from Virginia Polytechnic Institute in 1996. Feel free to send him any questions through the LinkedIn users group or email to marketing@specinnovations.com. And now I'll hand over the controls to John and we'll get started.
Great, thank you, Taylor. Today we're going to talk about V&V and Innoslate's Test Center. We'll go over a quick overview of V&V. We'll talk about requirements verification, Test Center itself, and test reports that can be generated through Test Center and other locations within Innoslate. So starting off, just to put V&V in context, what you're seeing on the screen is a standard engineering V. Down the left side of the V is where you'll do requirements and architecture development, things like functional modeling, physical modeling of your system. Across the bottom is where you'll build or buy or integrate your system. And coming up the right side of the V, you'll see integration and test and operational T&E. This is where your verification and your validation are going to take place. And once you go up the right side of the V, you're going to head into operations and maintenance. The system will be deployed, and then ultimately it will be disposed. So what we're going to talk about today is in those yellow boxes for verification and validation. And we'll start off with verification. So verification seeks to answer the question, are we building the product right? So you're going to see it in conjunction with things like unit test, developmental test. It's primarily to make sure that the system performs as it was specified to perform, and we want to be able to show things like traceability between design decisions and assumptions and those requirements. So there's going to be 5 methods of verification: analysis, demonstration, inspection, modeling and simulation, and test. That Innoslate represents those 5 methods. You may have 4. Some organizations will take modeling and simulation and they will put it under analysis. So depending on where you're at and how you do business, you may have 4 methods instead of 5. So validation, on the other hand, focuses on, are we building the right product? So once again, verification was, are we building the product right? Validation is, are we building the right product? And this will typically be in sync with operational test and evaluation. The key here is that you want to be able to obtain stakeholder buy-in. You want the end users to accept the system for what you intended it to be used for, and you want them to be prepared to take that system on and move it into operation. So there's going to be a number of different methods that are used for validation. Formal and informal reviews. M&S is going to be used a lot there because there are some things that are very expensive to test or not testable just for other practical reasons. And you will still have operational testing as well. So let's talk about how Innoslate handles verification methods. So within Innoslate, there are labels that are put on requirements, and those labels you can see over here on the right-hand side in the requirement metadata sidebar. Those correspond to those 5 verification methods that we talked about 2 slides back: analysis, demonstration, inspection, modeling and simulation, and test. And now we're talking about verification relationships. So when you click on a requirement, you should see a verified by relationship over on the relationships tab on the sidebar. If you have something filled in there like we do here in this example, you're going to see a small V up here in the right-hand corner. So you'll see that V. And this is a useful visual indicator to be able to help you to see if your requirements are verified. So what you can do is you can filter the entire list of requirements so that only the requirements are showing the statements are. And if you see V's going down the whole right-hand side, then you know you've got all your verification relationships established. There are 2 primary ways that that you connect up requirements to the test cases that you're going to use to verify them. Approach 1, you're going to have the requirement and it's going to be directly verified by a test case. In approach 2, you're going to have a requirement that's verified by a verification requirement, and the verification requirement is then verified by the test case. I've seen it done both ways on large programs. The key takeaway here is that the labels, those verification labels, the analysis, the demonstration, the inspection, they're going to want to be on this tier right here, one removed from the test case. So you're going to want to be running those reports from the requirement level. If you're using approach 1, you're going to want to run them from the verification requirement level if you're using approach 2. So the verification requirements will be in a separate document from the requirements in approach 2. If you put them on the requirements and you're using approach 2, you're going to need to replicate them here on the verification requirements. I recommend just doing them one time. That way you don't have to worry about trying to maintain synchronization between them. Okay, Test Center. So Test Center provides a means to create test suites. Test suites are where we keep a collection of test cases that are related to each other. It's a hierarchical organization. We'll look at that next slide. This is a slightly old view of Test Center. I think now we have create test suite up here instead of new test suite for the button, but by and large it's the same. You're going to see a tile for each of your test suites, and you're going to want to have different test suites for different things. Here's an example in this list of tests where you might want to have a different test suite. You can have different test suites within the same set of requirements, just however you want to logically group them. Typically, I like to have a test suite that maps pretty closely to my requirements. That way I don't have to go hopping around between different documents, but it all depends on what you're trying to get out of the tests. So the test suite itself. So the test suite is going to be comprised of your test cases. And what you want to do is during your test planning, you want to go and create your test cases. I usually like to have in the description field a list of the steps that I'm going to execute during that test case, and then you want to have your expected results filled in as well, keeping in mind that you're going to want to write these test cases and in the description field here so that those steps sync up with the method that you chose and that's sitting on the requirement itself. So if, for example, the requirement itself calls for an inspection, you don't want to write a set of test steps that are M&S, for example. So that's all done during the planning cycle. Then when you're actually executing the test, you're going to fill in the actual results and the status. And the statuses will roll up hierarchically in the status roll-up column here. That's automatically happens when you fill these in. As you can see here, it's going to take the next lower level in the hierarchy, and it's going to add those together. So here for on 1, we've got, I think, 2 red and 7. So red's failed and green is passed. I think we got 7 passed. If you look at 1-1 and 1-2 and so on down, those are going to add up to these numbers up here. And then over on the left-hand side, we have what's called test cycles. This is on the test cycle tab. So you can create test cycles when you want to save your current statuses and current actual results, and you want to rerun the test. You can create a new test cycle, and that'll store those historic values here under test cycles, and then you'll have the main test suite, which is your current values. Okay, now I'm briefly going to go into a demonstration of test center, test suite, test cycles, and requirements verification. So I'm going to switch over to Innoslate and go ahead and refresh that. Okay, so I'm going to start out. We're going to look at the my requirements document. It's a real simple requirements document, and I've got a handful of requirements here, 6 requirements, 8 total entities. And these are just some requirements for an aircraft that we're going to build. And on each one of these, you can see I've got a label over here for my type of verification. So in this case, we're going to measure the aircraft cruising speed. The aircraft shall maintain a cruising speed of 500 miles per hour. We're going to do that through a test. So I've got the test label on here. If I wanted to take it off and make it demonstration, I could do that. And now it's demonstration. I'm going to go back to test. But you'll see there that that's how we put methods on and off of these requirements. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go over to Test Center. You see I've got Test Center button up here at the top. If you don't have one, you can pin it over here on the under the menu. There'll be a pin button if it's not already there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select Test Center. And you can see here I've got my test suite. So here I've created a whole bunch of test cases. I didn't create them for the headings. You don't need to do that. You can if you want. You can put in there, that it has to be the sum of all the ones below it, but I didn't do that. I just chose to write my test steps here, and I put in my expected results. So that's what I would have in prior to running the test. Now I'm going to go back to Documents View again. And we're going to look at the documents because right now they're not connected. You notice there's no little V's here on the right-hand side. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to connect the first one from Documents View. I'm going to go ahead and put in the relationship for that. I happen to know it's going to be TC1, so I'm going to look for TC1, cruising speed. So when I click this check mark here, you see I just got that little V up here at the top. So that's an indication that relationship's been formed. Now I'm going to show you another way to, first I'm going to save this, then I'm going to show you another way to make those relationships quicker. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to use a traceability matrix. There are lots of ways to do traceability matrices. You can build queries. You can do it from database view. This is a real simple way when you're dealing with documents and test documents. So I'm going to, it looks like it's already been put in here. I'm going to go ahead and show you how I got there. So what I did is there's different options here. I could do a query. I could do a query on, let's just say TC, because I know TCs are my test cases in this case. And I could say a verified relationship, and you can see it's put those in there across the top, all my test cases. What we had when it came up, because I'd already put it in earlier, was I had picked the hierarchy, and then I picked the test case document. So in this case, it was the aircraft test plan. And I'm going to put in the verified by relationship again. By selecting that relationship type here, what I'm doing is I'm saying all these X's here are going to equate to that relationship when reading from the vertical column to the horizontal column, to the horizontal row. So that means that the cruising speed here requirement is going to be verified by the cruising speed test case. So you'll see when I float over that, over there on the left-hand panel, I've got the left entity and the top entity, and I can see the text, so I can go ahead and make those connections. Now, for some reason, it's not coming out in the order I would like here on the top. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to force it with a query. I'm not sure why it wasn't coming out correctly. But I'm going to put order by number in here. I'm going to put number PC. and verified by. That way, it just makes it easier to form the relationships. Okay, so I know 2 is a heading. I don't need one for that. So I'm going to want boarding access, boarding throughput, food storage, fuel type labeling, bonding labeling. And then I hit save, and it just saved all those relationships. So that's a real quick way to make a lot of relationships if you know what needs to get connected to what. Now you can see here I filtered my requirements document on only requirements. So what I'm doing is I'm checking to see all those V's are there, and all those V's are there. That means I've got my verified by relationships in place. Okay, so next I'm going to go to Test Center, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to input the test results. So I'm going to go through here, and I'm going to say, okay, this is my test. First one, we're going to say it failed this time. We're going to say I can only get up to 480 for sustained. MPH, and we're going to say failed. For boarding, we're going to say these 2 are blocked. I couldn't do my boarding test. Maybe I couldn't get access to a jetway. And then we're going to say the rest of these. We're going to say the rest of these passed. So we're just going to say that the expected result and the actual result was the same. Okay. And deselect and save those. Okay, I'm coming back in. Okay, so you can see how it's rolled up. These 2 blocks rolled up to the 2 blocked at the next higher level. These 2 passed down here rolled up to the next higher level for passed. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say I want to rerun this test. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new test cycle. I'm going to call this my initial test. And I'm going to create it. So now if I go under test cycles over here in my left-hand panel, you can see I've got initial test. So initial test, all my results are still there. Under the current aircraft test plan, it's all set to not run. So let's just say I'm going to go through here and I'm going to set these all to passed. I'm just going to copy the results over. We're going to say everything ran well this time. And we'll use the difference here to show how some things work when we get to the reports. You can see here that this one's half not run, half passed. It's updating it dynamically as I put the data in. Okay, so now they're all passed. I'm gonna go ahead and save this. And I'll come back in. So you can see I've got the current values, and I go to initial test. Those are my old ones that are saved. I can have as many test cycles as I want. Okay, now we're going to go and we're going to talk about the reports. Okay, so I'm going to discuss 2 primary reports here. One is the verification cross-reference matrix. It's gotten to through documents view, and what it's going to do is it's going to show the requirements versus the verification methods. Now, I recommend that you filter on requirements in your document like I did earlier. I'll show you that again when we get to this. That way you won't have the heading rows in here that are blank. So you'll just see the actual requirements and what their verification methods are. You can see you're going to have options you can click on and off over here. So if your organization doesn't use modeling and simulation as a verification method, you can click that X, and that'll take that row out of the table. So you'll just get the 4 that you use if you're one of those organizations. So the primary purpose of the VCRM is to show requirements versus methods. The other one we're going to talk about is the RVTM, Requirements Verification Traceability Matrix. This one shows the verification method and the associated test cases for each requirement. You also get to this from within the documents view. And once again, you can select any attributes you want within the test case. So here for the test case, you've got number, name, description, and status. If you wanted to put in an expected value and you wanted to put in actual value, you could do that, and it would show up in your table. If you didn't want to have the verification method here, you could take that out. So it's configurable for any fields within requirement and test case. Okay, so now we're going to look at how those are run. So I'll go first to the documents view, and then from within documents view, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run first the VCRM. So I'm going to run it right now with everything selected, so you can see what it looks like. So it's running creating a report. Got the report, and you can see when I put my borders on, I got some rows that don't have anything, like the boarding row here, row 2, because that was a heading. So, and likewise with 4. If I wanted to get those out, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, what I can do is I can go and filter my document on only requirements. So now I'm only seeing the requirements. I can rerun the report, VCRM. Maybe I want to take out modeling and sim because I didn't have that. I don't think any of mine were modeling and sim. So I can create my report. And now I've got one that only shows 4 methods, and it doesn't show any headings. So I'll be able to tell by looking at this if everything's filled in or not, or if I'm missing something. So that's the VCRM. The other one that we want to look at is the and once again I'm still filtered on only requirements here, is the RVTM. And what this one's going to do, it's going to show me the connections to the test cases, and it's showing me the statuses on them. So it's got my test cases over here in rows E through H, and I've got my requirements here in rows A through D with the verification method in this case. I'm going to go one other place to show you one other thing, and that is the under Test Center. There's another type. It's called the TBM, I believe. There's a report here, TBM output. TBM output works test cases to requirements, so it's somewhat the opposite of that. The interesting thing about TBM, so you can see here, I've got cases where there's nothing filled in because these are headers. I can't filter the headers out going from the requirements or from the test cases to the requirements because these are all test cases. So I really don't have that ability. But the interesting thing here is this is showing my latest run. If I wanted to, I can go back and look at the previous test cycle, the initial test cases, and I can run that report from there. And I should be able to see then the ones with the fails and the blocks. So if I wanted to go back and run it against the historic data that was in one of those prior test cycles, I can do that with the TBM. Okay, so that's all I have. I'm going to turn it back over to Taylor.
Sure, if you want to promote your training, go ahead and do that.
Sure. We have a number of different training opportunities within SPEC for use of Innoslate and systems engineering. You can find Innoslate training at specinnovations.com/Innoslate/training. We do provide virtual on-site training, online webinars, video tutorials, or you can contact us at sales@innoslate.com, and we can tailor courses directly to your needs.
If you're interested in having our team help you get started using Test Center to support rigorous verification and validation processes, contact our sales team to get you started. You can reach them by email at sales@innoslate.com or through our website, specinnovations.com/contact-us. Next slide, please. You've received several questions already. If you haven't done so, please send your questions through the panel on the right that pops up after clicking Q&A on the top bar. He will answer as many questions as he can before our time is up. First question is, how do you handle validation?
Yeah, I would handle validation the same way as we handle verification. In general, I would not expect the verification method inspection label to be used for validation. Typically, at that point, you're beyond things that are visually inspectable. But you would handle it the same way. You would create test cases and you would tie those to whatever your operational requirements or needs are.
What is the RVM report?
Yeah, so if you were looking real closely when I ran some of the reports in from documents view, there was one there that was called the RVM. So the RVM is slightly different than the other reports in that it allows us to tie to things other than the just the test cases for verification. So let's say I had let's say I was going to have on my cruising speed one here, I wanted to have that be verified by, in addition to the cruising speed, it was going to be verified by my an organization, say. So for the sake of demonstration here, I'm going to go create an organization. We'll call it test organization. And I'm going to add it here. So I've got a test organization, which is an asset, and I've got a cruising speed test case here. Now, if I were to run the, let me save it first. If I were to run one of my other ones, like the RVTM, the RVTM is only going to show the test case. So once again, let me just go run the RVTM, and we'll see what shows up for the top one there. So for cruising speed, it's saying its verification method is test and it's verified by, oh, it did put it in there. Okay. It did put it in there. It put in test organization as well within the RVTM. So then the main difference with the RVM is going to be that it's not going to show other fields like status. The RVM will only show the standard Innoslate entity fields. So on the RVM, if I run that, I can't pick status, for example. I can only pick fields that are common to all of them. So this would create a report that is, it does show the class. That's going to be one difference. It's going to show the class of the entity. So you'll see here that it's showing that it's test case for the first one, an asset for the second one. And these are the only fields that are selectable, are these four, because other things are not going to be common to test cases and to assets and to whatever else you put on there. But that's the RVM. It's not one that I use very often, but it is one that may be useful depending on what you want to show in a table. If you want to try and get at who's doing the testing, this is a good one to use.
We discussed how to use a test suite/case to verify a requirement. Please say a few things about how to establish a relationship between the requirement and the function or action or component asset. It satisfies the appropriate relationship.
Yeah, so that's typically something we cover in other webinars, but I'll try and touch on it briefly here. So what I would do is I would use the traced to relationship or the satisfied by relationship, depending on what you're trying to connect to. So we can look at how I don't think I have anything pre-built in here, but we could look at what it could be satisfied by. So typically I'll put in if a relationship between a requirement and a function, I would use satisfied by, and then that function would do what the requirement says, and then I would have the requirement or the function itself performed by an asset. So that would be how I would make my connection through that link. Did that touch on what you were trying to ask?
Orlando, let us know in the comments if that does. In the meantime, the next question is, what is the best method to import a test plan document into a test suite?
Yeah, so I would say probably the best means to get it in there would be to do a spreadsheet import, depending on how large it is. So what you would do is you would go into Import Analyzer, and within Import Analyzer, you're going to have a number of different options. You could try parsing it in. If it's a Word document, that may be an option as well. Typically, I like CSVs because they tend to be structured. So what you would do is you would select a document type. You could put in test suite, and then you could say the default would be a test case, and then you would have your different fields that you would have to map on the next screen. I think 2 screens over. So I would click on here. I would drop my file in here. And then after I drop that file in, it's going to ask me to map the columns to fields that are test case fields. So I would be putting, for example, my list of steps. I would tie that to description, and I would put my expected results. I'd tie that to the expected value field. And then if you have any others, you would have to deal with them on a case-by-case basis, but those would be probably the primary ones, plus the name and the number that you'd want to put in there. And it will set them in a hierarchy if you have a hierarchical numbering scheme. So for example, if you have 2 or test case, let's say TC.2 and then TC2.1 and TC2.2, it'll put 2.1 and 2.2 under 2. So it will know to do that. But that would probably be the best approach, would be using that CSV file as an import. You will lose some of your formatting. Just be aware of that. But depending on how much you have to bring in, that may be the best approach.
Can Innoslate provide other aspects of V&V, such as test facilities and equipment?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of the things, let me bring up a slide here. So these are some of the, it's just a real quick overview of some of the types of things that we like to use Innoslate for in supported test activities. So things like tying organizations and organizational roles and creating them in hierarchy diagrams, tying equipment to the test procedures. For example, if you have a test procedure that requires a test suite or requires a specific piece of software, you could have those as assets, and those could support the test cases themselves. But you can see here, there's a lot of different things that you could do. And these different things we can tie together within Innoslate, and we could put them in a test plan, a big test plan, or we could put them in a test suite, which we could consider more of a list of test procedures. But I think in answer to your question about equipment in particular, going back to the test center and the test suite, so we would go to one of these items here, and maybe we have a relationship between that and let's see. So test case, we could use the performed by relationship to get to that asset. So maybe I want to have in this case, I'm going to have an asset would be, well, let's just make it simple here and call it the aircraft. And I'll save that. And then I could generate a report. Let's just say I want to go into my database view, and I'm going to look at my test cases, and I want to generate a report that's going to be let's see, labels. We'll take out that, and we'll make this entity, and we'll say performed by. The parent's going to be the entity up top here. So you can see now I've got a table here where I've got my, this particular test case is performed by that asset. And I could make this more complicated, but this is the simple example. And in order to get that as output, we would go and we would run the entity table report. And the entity table report will then show, here's my test case and here's the equipment that's being used to support it. And we could build that up, and it can be as complicated or as simple as you want. And I've seen that done. It's not that tough to do.
How is the validation of the needs conducted, or is this not part of the webinar?
So I think the best approach for that would be to take those needs and to put them into something similar to a requirements document. So, here we got a document that has actual requirements, and you would then go and you would create another document that had your needs in there and what you were trying to validate, and then you would have a corresponding test suite over in Test Center for those items. And you wouldn't have to have these labels. It would probably be mostly demonstration or analysis, or potentially it could be a test. It could be a complicated test in order to validate that. But that's how you would do it. You would do it the exact same way you're doing verification. You would tie those need statements, which would be in a document over in Documents View, to a series of test cases, whether they're actual tests or demonstrations, it doesn't matter. You would tie it to those. You would have some expected result coming out of there, and then you would have an actual value that would correspond to them. So it would be very analogous to what we just saw during this webinar.
Why is there more than one way to relate test cases to requirements?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's just the way different organizations do business. So what we looked at before in these slides, we've got the approach 1 and approach 2. It's just that that's how it's done in different organizations, and Innoslate does not try and force one method on you. So it's flexible enough that no matter which way you do it, we can accommodate it. We're not trying to force your procedures to adopt to what our tool does. We're trying to make our tool flexible enough that we can handle whatever you want to do.
Great. That looks like all the questions we have. John, if you could please go back to the slides. I believe it's slide 19. We would like to thank you again for joining us today. As a reminder, we will be following up with you very soon to send you a link to the recording and the presentation slide deck. We hope you can join us for next month's webinar, Meet and COSI's Guide to Writing Requirements with AI Quality Checker. SPEC Systems Engineer, Amir, will cover COSI's standards, introduce Innoslate's Quality Checker, perform practical demonstrations, and more. Your link to sign up will be in the email that is coming soon to your mailbox with the slides and recording. Next slide. We also encourage you to visit our website and our blog, as well as connect with us on social media. That concludes today's presentation. Have a wonderful day, and we hope to see you at our next webinar.